The old alien sat in his chair, his body shaking slightly. Kethrall had 4 arms, but 2 were now metal replacements that clicked when he moved them. His large bug-like eyes looked tired and sad. The room was quiet, except for the hum of recording. Machines. Zixara, a young filmmaker, adjusted her camera and looked at the veteran. She had traveled across 3 star systems to hear his story. Everyone knew about the human war, but few aliens wanted to talk about it. Kethrall was different. He wanted people to know what really happened. "Are you ready to begin?" Zixara asked softly. Kethrall nodded slowly. His voice was rough when he spoke, like old metal grinding together. 50 years, he said. 50 years since the war ended, and I still dream about them every night. The alien veteran shifted in his seat. His real arms moved to touch his metal ones, a habit he had developed over the years. "You want to know about the humans? About why we called their war front a nightmare? I will tell you everything." Zixara leaned forward. This was exactly what she needed for her documentary. "Start wherever you feel comfortable." "I was young then," Kethrall began. "Strong and proud. I served in the 47th Assault Fleet of the Galactic Alliance. We were the best fighters in known space. 12 different alien species worked together in our fleet. We had conquered 47 worlds without losing a single major battle." The old veteran's eyes grew distant as he remembered. "My commander was War Commander Elexoth. He was a giant, even by our standards. Elexoth had led successful attacks on 6 different star systems. He told us that humans would be easy, just another primitive species that needed to learn their place in the galaxy." Kethrall paused to drink from a strange tube connected to his chair. The liquid inside glowed blue. The intelligence reports said humans were nothing special. They had only just learned to travel faster than light. Their ships were made of simple metal. Their weapons shot solid pieces of metal instead of energy beams. We laughed at how backward they seemed. "Our weapons were far superior," he continued. "We had plasma cannons that could melt through any armor. Our energy shields could stop any attack we had ever seen. Our ships were powered by controlled stars. We thought we were gods compared to these humans." The veteran's metal arms clinked as he gestured. "The Alliance had rules for dealing with primitive species. First, we would destroy their military. Then we would take their useful planets. Finally, we would offer the survivors a place in our empire as workers. It was clean and simple. We had done it many times before." Zixara made notes on her data pad. "What made you think humans would be different?" "Nothing," Kethrall said, with a bitter laugh. "That was our first mistake. We saw their chemical rockets and metal ships and thought they were thousands of years behind us. Our scientists calculated that we could control all human space in 3 solar cycles. Some said we could do it in 1. The old alien's voice became quieter. "I remember the briefing before our first attack. War Commander Elexoth stood before 3,000 soldiers. He said we were bringing civilization to another backward species. He said their resistance would be brief and weak. He promised us easy victories and quick promotions. My clutchmate Vorthal was excited," Kethrall continued. "We had grown up together, trained together, fought in 5 campaigns together. He said conquering humans would be a vacation compared to our last war against the crystal beings of Zirion. Those creatures could turn their entire bodies into weapons. Humans just looked like soft, weak mammals." The veteran's real hands began to shake slightly. "We studied their biology from long-range scans. Humans were small compared to most of us. They had no natural armor, no poison, no ability to regenerate lost body parts. They needed special suits to survive in space. They seemed fragile in every way that mattered for warfare. But there were strange things in the reports that we ignored, Cathrall admitted. Human planets showed signs of massive warfare throughout their history. They had fought each other constantly for thousands of years. Their entertainment was full of combat stories. Even their children played war games. We thought this just proved they were violent and disorganized. Zixara looked up from her notes. When did you first see humans in battle? Cathrall's metal arms made a grinding sound as he clenched them into fists. The colony world they called New Busan. It was supposed to be our first easy victory. Intelligence said only 50,000 humans lived there, mostly farmers and miners. They had no military base, no warships, no planetary defenses. War Commander Alexoth decided to make it a training exercise for our newest soldiers. He assigned just one battle group to take the entire planet. 500 of our best warriors against 50,000 humans who we thought were helpless civilians. The veteran's voice became very quiet. I was chosen to lead a strike team of 20 soldiers. Our mission was simple: land near their main settlement, destroy any resistance, and capture their leaders for questioning. Alexoth said it would take maybe 2 hours. As we approached the planet, everything looked normal. Human ships tried to run away from us just like we expected. Some launched primitive missiles at our fleet, but our energy shields stopped them easily. We laughed as the metal projectiles bounced off our barriers like toys. Cathrall stopped, talking, and stared at the wall for a long moment. Zixara waited patiently. She could see this was difficult for him. That was the last time I laughed during the war, the veteran finally said. The last time any of us laughed, because we had no idea what humans were really capable of. We thought we were hunting helpless prey. Instead, we had walked into the den of the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. What happened when you landed? Zixara asked gently. Cathrall looked directly at the camera for the first time. His large eyes were filled with old pain and fear that time had not healed. Everything went wrong, he whispered. Everything. Cathrall took another drink from his glowing tube before continuing his story. The memories were painful, but he needed to tell them. Zixara adjusted her camera angle to catch the fear that still lived in the old veteran's eyes. Our landing. Ships touched down outside New Busan colony just as the sun was rising, Cathrall said. The human settlement looked peaceful from above. Small buildings, farming areas, mining equipment. Nothing that looked dangerous. Our sensors showed humans moving around, but they seemed to be running away from us rather than preparing to fight. Veteran's metal fingers drummed against his chair. Captain Dongsu was the human in charge of their defense. He sent us a radio message as we landed. His voice was calm and polite. He said they wanted to talk, to find a peaceful solution. He asked us to meet him at the edge of town with just a few representatives from each side. War Commander Alexoth found this amusing, Cathrall continued. Here was a primitive human trying to negotiate with the mighty Galactic Alliance. Alexoth decided to play along for a few minutes before crushing them. He thought it would be good entertainment for the troops. Zixara made more notes. Did you meet with this Captain Dongsu? Yes, but not how we expected, the alien veteran replied. As we marched toward the meeting point, the humans launched more of their chemical rockets at our ships. These missiles seemed even more primitive than the first ones. They moved slowly and left trails of smoke that we could see from kilometers away. Cathrall's voice became tense. Our energy shields activated automatically. The first missiles hit. our barriers and seemed to explode harmlessly. More followed, dozens of them. We kept walking toward the human settlement, not worried at all. Our shields had never failed against any weapon. But then something strange happened, the veteran continued. The later missiles were not exploding against our shields. They were passing through them. Not all of them, but enough to worry our technicians. The humans had somehow changed their weapons during the flight. The old alien shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Our science officer, Thekmol, ran emergency scans on the human projectiles. What he found made no sense. The missiles were simple metal tubes filled with explosive chemicals. There was nothing advanced about them. They should not have been able to penetrate our energy barriers. What we learned later was that humans had been studying our shield technology from the moment we entered their star system, Kethral explained. They had powerful computers that could analyze energy patterns very quickly. While we were laughing at their primitive weapons, they were figuring out how to beat our defenses. Zixara looked puzzled. How could they do that so fast? Humans are adapters, the veteran said with something like respect in his voice. Their entire evolution has been about solving problems quickly or dying. They had taken our shield frequency and built weapons specifically to penetrate it. In just a few hours, they had overcome technology that took us centuries to perfect. Kethral continued his story. The meeting with Captain Dong-Su finally happened, but not where we expected. As we approached the colony, the ground beneath, our lead squad exploded. The humans had buried explosives along the path, simple chemical bombs that our sensors had not detected because they contained no electronic components. 3 of my soldiers died instantly, the veteran said quietly, including my friend Gorthpel, who had survived 12 major battles, killed by what the humans called a pipe bomb, made from materials they had lying around their settlement. At the aliens' metal arms clenched again. That was when Captain Dong-Su contacted us again. His voice was still calm and polite. He said he was sorry for our losses, but we had ignored his request for peaceful talks. He gave us one more chance to negotiate or face the consequences. War Commander Ilexoth was furious, Kethral remembered. No primitive species had ever killed Alliance soldiers with such simple weapons. He ordered a full assault on the colony. 500 of our best warriors charged toward the human settlement, energy weapons ready, expecting to crush their resistance in minutes. Zixara leaned forward. What happened then? The humans were gone, Kethral said simply. The buildings were empty. No people, no vehicles, no sign of where 50,000 colonists had disappeared to. It was like they had vanished into the air. The veteran's voice became darker. But they had not really left. Lieutenant Colonel Yu Jin had organized something they called tactical withdrawal. The humans had hidden in underground tunnels that connected to their mining operations. They had turned their entire colony into a trap. As our soldiers searched the empty buildings, the attacks began, Kethral continued. Sniper fire from concealed positions, explosives hidden in doorways, booby traps that used the colony's own infrastructure as weapons. The humans had rigged their water systems to spray acid, turned their power generators into bombs, and filled their ventilation systems with poisonous gas. The old alien paused to collect himself. The memories were clearly difficult. Our soldiers were trained for honorable combat, formation fighting where both sides could see each other. The humans fought like ghosts. They would attack and disappear before we could respond. They used weapons we could not detect until it was too late. Lieutenant Colonel Yu Jin led teams that seemed to know exactly where we would go next, Kethral said. They would collapse buildings just as our squads passed underneath. They turned civilian vehicles into rolling bombs. They used construction, Equipment as improvised weapons that our battle computers had no programming to counter. Zixara made rapid notes. How long did this fighting last? 6 hours, the veteran replied. In 6 hours, the humans had killed or wounded 200 of our soldiers. We had found and eliminated maybe 20 of theirs. War Commander Ilex Oth called for reinforcements from orbit. This was supposed to be a simple occupation, but it had become a nightmare. Catherall's voice became very quiet. The worst part was the psychological warfare. The humans had studied our species during the brief peace contact. They knew our weaknesses, our fears, our cultural taboos. They played sounds over their communication systems that drove our warriors into panic. They displayed images that were specifically designed to terrify each of our species. By the end of that first day, many of our soldiers were refusing to enter human buildings, the veteran admitted. Some were having what human doctors would later teach us to call panic attacks. We had conquered dozens of worlds, but we had never faced an enemy that could get inside our minds like this. The old alien looked directly at Zixara. And that was just one small colony. We still thought we were facing a minor annoyance that could be crushed with enough force. We had no idea that every human settlement in the galaxy was preparing similar surprises for us. We had no idea what we had really started. Catherall's breathing became heavier as he continued his story. Zixara noticed that his metal arms were making small clicking sounds, as if the machinery inside was responding to his stress. The veteran seemed to be reliving the memories as he spoke them. After New Busan, everything changed, Catherall said. The Alliance High Command decided that humans were more dangerous than first reports suggested. They sent 3 full battle fleets to human space. 50,000 soldiers, 200 warships, enough firepower to destroy entire planets. The old alien paused to adjust his position in the chair. But the humans had changed too. In just 2 weeks, their ships began appearing with modifications we had never seen. They had taken pieces of our technology from the wreckage at New Busan and somehow made it work with their primitive systems. How is that possible? Zixara asked. Human engineers are different from ours, Catherall explained. Our species develop technology slowly and carefully. We test everything for years before using it. Humans just try things and see what happens. They are willing to risk failure in ways that terrify more careful species. The veteran's voice became filled with something like admiration. Commander Ji-Ho of the Human Defense Fleet became our greatest nightmare. He commanded a ship called the Soul's Defender. It was built from human metal, but powered by our energy cores. It had human projectile weapons, but enhanced with our plasma technology. Ji-Ho seemed to know what we would do before we did it, Catherall continued. Every time our fleets tried to attack human positions, he was already there waiting. His ship would appear from nowhere, strike our weak points, and disappear before we could respond. It was like fighting someone who could see the future. Zixara made notes rapidly. Was he using some kind of alien technology to predict your movements? No, the veteran replied with a bitter laugh. He was using human history. We learned later that humans had been fighting wars for their entire existence. Every human child studies thousands of years of combat tactics. They learn about strategy and warfare the way our children learn mathematics. Catherall's metal fingers drummed against his chair again. Commander Ji-Ho had studied every major battle in human history. He understood patterns of attack and defense that our military academies had never considered. While we were using standard alliance tactics that had worked against other species, He was using techniques developed over thousands of years of constant warfare. But the real terror was not their tactics, the veteran continued. It was their psychology. Most species in the Galactic Alliance fight for logical reasons: territory, resources, survival of the group. Humans fight for ideas that cannot be touched or measured. The old alien's voice became quieter. During the Battle of New Sol Station, I saw something that still haunts my dreams. Major Tae-hyun commanded a human battalion that was completely surrounded. His space station was damaged and losing air. His soldiers were outnumbered 50-1. Any reasonable species would have surrendered. What did they do instead? Zixara asked. They turned their space station into a weapon, Kethral replied. Major Tae-hyun used the station's rotation to create artificial gravity traps. When our soldiers tried to board, they were crushed by forces they could not see or understand. He turned their life support systems into improvised explosives. He used their own dying station as a fortress that held off our entire armada for 6 days. The veteran's voice filled with confusion that had lasted 50 years. The humans were dying. Their air was running out. Their weapons were failing, but they kept fighting anyway. Not because they thought they could win, but because they believed in something they called freedom. I still do not understand what that word really means to them. And their adaptation speed was terrifying, Kethral continued. Engineer Captain Minho led teams that could take apart our captured weapons and understand them within hours. Technology that had taken my species centuries to develop, humans, were improving in days. Zixara looked up from her notes. How were they learning so fast? Humans approach technology like they approach warfare, the veteran explained. They are not afraid to break things. They take apart our weapons, study the pieces, and put them back together in new ways. Sometimes their modifications fail and explode. Sometimes they create weapons more powerful than our originals. Kethral's metal arms made grinding sounds as he gestured. Minho's engineering teams created hybrid weapons that used human projectiles powered by our energy systems. They built armor that combined our shield technology with human metal plating. They took our communication systems and used them to coordinate attacks in ways we had never seen. But what scared our commanders most was how humans handled stress, the veteran said. All Alliance species need rest periods and calm environments to fight effectively. When we become too stressed or frightened, our combat ability decreases rapidly. The old alien's voice became filled with awe. Humans become more dangerous when they are desperate. The more hopeless their situation, the more creative and violent they become. It goes against everything we know about logical behavior. I saw this during the siege of New Incheon, Kethral continued. Admiral Hyajin commanded the human fleet there. Our forces had surrounded her completely. She had no way to escape and no hope of victory. Any Alliance commander would have tried to negotiate surrender terms. Instead, Admiral Hyajin ordered her ships to ram our vessels directly, the veteran said with disbelief still in his voice. She turned civilian transport ships into kinetic weapons. She used cargo haulers as guided missiles. She sacrificed her own fleet to destroy ours. Zixara stopped writing. That sounds like suicide. That is what we thought, Kethral agreed. No Alliance species had ever used suicide tactics effectively. The psychological impact on our forces was devastating. Soldiers who had fought in dozens of campaigns became afraid to engage human ships. They never knew when humans would do something completely insane that somehow worked. The veteran's voice became darker. And then there were the specialists. Dr. Wansik had studied our captured soldiers and learned about our biology. He created sonic weapons that were tuned specifically to each Alliance species. Sounds that could paralyze us or drive us insane or make us too sick to fight. Engineer. Gyuri developed nano-weapons that could disable our technology by interfering with the quantum frequencies our electronics used, Kethrall continued. She could shut down our ships from the inside using microscopic machines that we could not detect until it was too late. The old alien's voice became a whisper. And Colonel Byung-ho learned to speak 17 different Alliance languages. Not just the words, but the cultural meanings behind them. He would broadcast messages that were specifically designed to terrify each species according to their deepest fears. By the end of the 3rd month, 3 Alliance species had requested withdrawal from human space, Kethrall admitted. Our own soldiers were developing what humans called post-traumatic stress disorder from facing an enemy that seemed to have no limits to their creativity in warfare. The veteran looked directly at the camera again. We had started the war thinking humans were primitive and weak. We discovered they were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. The recording room had grown cold during the long interview. Kethrall's metal arms reflected the dim lights as he shifted in his chair. His real hands were shaking more now, and Zixara could see old pain in his large eyes. The veteran was reaching, the hardest part of his story. The turning point came during the Battle of the Broken Stars. Kethrall began slowly. It was 6 months into the war. The Alliance had committed everything to defeating humanity. 7 battle fleets, 100,000 soldiers, our most advanced weapons. We thought we finally had enough force to crush human resistance. The old alien's voice became strained. My own ship, the Vengeance of Veltar, was part of the attack force. We had been rebuilt after New Busan with better armor and stronger weapons. I was now a squad commander, leading 30 soldiers instead of 20. The survivors of my original unit had been promoted to fill positions left empty by the dead. The human ship Soul's Pride was our primary target, Kethrall continued. Captain Seok-jin commanded it. Intelligence reports said his vessel was just a modified cargo hauler with improvised weapons. Our dreadnought alone had more firepower than his entire fleet. Zixara looked up from her notes. What made this battle different from the others? Everything. Went wrong from the moment we arrived, the veteran replied. The Soul's Pride was not running away like we expected. It was moving toward our battle formation at high speed. Captain Seok-jin was not trying to escape. He was attacking us directly. Kethrall's metal fingers clicked against each other. Our fleet commander, Admiral Krexthol, thought this proved humans had finally gone completely insane. A single small ship attacking a force that outnumbered it 100 to 1. He ordered all ships to focus fire on the Soul's Pride and destroy it quickly. But the human ship did not behave like any vessel we had encountered, the veteran continued. Instead of trying to avoid our weapons, it flew directly into our formation. Captain Seok-jin was using our own numbers against us. We could not fire at him without risking hits on our own ships. The old alien paused to drink from his glowing tube. His hands were shaking so badly that some of the liquid spilled onto his chair. The Soul's Pride had been modified with equipment we did not recognize. Mining lasers that had been turned into cutting weapons, industrial grabbing arms that could tear apart ship hulls, cargo loading systems that fired chunks of metal at incredible speeds. None of it was military technology, Kethrall explained with amazement still in his voice. Captain Seok-jin had taken civilian equipment and turned it into weapons more effective than our advanced battle systems. The mining lasers cut through our armor like it was thin paper. The grabbing arms tore pieces off our ships and threw them at other vessels. Zixara made rapid notes. How could civilian equipment be more effective than military weapons? Because humans design everything to be useful in multiple ways, the veteran replied. Their mining lasers were built to cut through asteroids, much harder than our ship armor. Their industrial equipment was designed to move massive weights in space. When used as weapons, they were more powerful than anything our military engineers had created. Kethral's voice became filled with a mixture of fear and respect. But the real terror was how Captain Seok-Jin fought. He moved his ship like it was part of his own body. Every action seemed planned perfectly, even though he was making decisions faster than our computers could calculate responses. The Soul's Pride disabled 2 of our dreadnoughts before we understood what was happening, the veteran continued. Not destroyed, disabled. Captain Seok-Jin was not trying to kill us. He was trying to capture our ships and technology. Even while outnumbered and outgunned, humans were thinking about how to improve their position for future battles. The old alien's metal arms made grinding sounds as he gestured. Admiral Krexthol finally ordered a retreat to regroup and analyze human tactics. But Captain Seok-Jin did not let us leave. His single ship pursued our entire fleet, picking off damaged vessels and rescuing human survivors from disabled ships. That was when we realized we were not fighting a war anymore, Kethral said quietly. We were being hunted. The humans had stopped trying to just defend their territory. They were actively hunting Alliance forces throughout the galaxy. Zixara looked confused. How could one human ship hunt an entire fleet? Captain Seok-Jin had learned something that terrified our command structure, the veteran explained. He understood that space is three-dimensional in ways that most species do not use effectively. While we moved our ships in formations like armies on a planet's surface, he used the full volume of space as his battlefield. Kethral continued with growing stress in his voice. The Soul's Pride could appear above or below our formations, attack from angles we were not prepared for, and disappear into areas of space we thought were empty. Captain Seok-Jin had studied how human submarines fought in their ancient ocean wars and adapted those tactics to space combat. But what broke our fleet's morale was not the tactical defeat, the veteran said. It was what happened during the battle. Human ships were broadcasting messages to our soldiers in perfect alliance. Languages. They were offering medical aid to our wounded, even while they were shooting at us. The old alien's voice became confused. Admiral He-Jin contacted our command ship personally during the fighting. She spoke in flawless Veltarian, better than some of our own people. She said she was sorry for our losses and offered to accept our surrender with full military honors. This made no sense to us, Kethral continued. How could humans be so violent in combat but offer mercy to defeated enemies? Our military psychology experts had no explanation for this contradiction. It was like fighting 2 different species at the same time. Zixara made more notes. Did any Alliance forces accept the human surrender offer? 3 ships from the Xerion Crystal Fleet surrendered immediately, the veteran replied. Their crews said they would rather face human captivity than continue fighting against an enemy that could not be predicted or understood. This caused panic throughout the Alliance command structure. Kethral's metal arms clinked as he adjusted his position. But the worst revelation came when we analyzed the Soul's Pride after the battle. Our intelligence teams discovered that Captain Seok-Jin's ship was not even primarily a military vessel. It was still carrying cargo containers full of civilian supplies. The humans had been treating our entire war as a minor inconvenience, the veteran said with disbelief. They were fighting the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy while simultaneously conducting normal trade and civilian activities. Our total war effort was just background noise to their daily lives. The old alien's voice became very quiet. That was when Alliance Command realized we could not win. Not because we lacked the military power to defeat humanity, but because we did not understand what we were fighting against. How do you defeat an enemy that treats your greatest efforts as minor distractions? The psychological impact on our forces was complete, Kethral continued. Soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds were requesting transfers away from human space. Some were developing what human doctors called panic disorders, just from hearing about human tactics. Within a week of the Battle of the Broken Stars, 5 Alliance species had formally requested withdrawal from the war, the veteran admitted. Not tactical retreat, but complete abandonment of human space. They said the costs of fighting humans were too high for any possible benefit. Kethral looked directly at Zixara with tired, ancient eyes. We had learned the most important lesson about humans too late. They were not just another species to be conquered. They were something completely different from anything the galaxy had ever seen, and they were just getting started. The interview room had grown darker as the day progressed. Kethral sat quietly for several minutes, gathering strength for the final part of his story. His metal arms had stopped their nervous clicking, but his real hands still trembled. Zixara waited patiently, knowing this was the most important part of the veteran's testimony. The war officially ended 8 months after it began, Kethral finally said. But it did not end because humans defeated us in battle. It ended because our own forces refused to fight them anymore. The old alien's voice was barely above a whisper. My last combat mission was supposed to be an attack on a human mining station. Simple target, minimal defenses, easy victory to boost morale. But when our transport reached the attack point, half the soldiers refused to leave the ship. These were warriors who had fought crystal beings that could turn their bodies into cutting weapons. Kethral continued. Soldiers who had battled gas creatures that could dissolve metal with their touch. Veterans of a dozen campaigns against the most dangerous species in known space. And they were afraid to fight human miners. Zixara leaned forward. What had frightened them so badly? Stories, the veteran replied simply. Stories from other battles, other encounters with humans. Every Alliance soldier had heard about human tactics that made no logical sense but somehow worked. We had all seen footage of humans doing impossible, things under impossible conditions. Kethral's metal fingers drummed slowly against his chair. The mining station was defended by Engineer Captain Subin and maybe 200 civilians. Our intelligence said they had no military training and only basic equipment. Any other species would have surrendered when they saw our battle fleet approaching. Instead, Engineer Captain Subin contacted us directly, the veteran continued. She spoke perfect Alliance standard and offered to give us a tour of their mining operation. She said we might find their extraction techniques interesting for our own worlds. The old alien shook his head in confusion that had lasted 50 years. She was not afraid. A human civilian, facing a military force that could destroy her entire station, and she was trying to start a conversation about mining technology. It was like she did not understand that we were there to kill her. What happened during this encounter? Zixara asked. Our fleet commander, Captain Vexorth, was so confused by Engineer Captain Subin's response that he actually accepted her offer, Kethral replied. He thought it might be some kind of human psychological trick, but he was curious about what they were really planning. The veteran's voice became thoughtful. Engineer Captain Subin gave us a complete tour of their mining operation via video. Link. She showed us techniques for extracting rare metals that were more efficient than our best methods. She explained human approaches to asteroid processing that could revolutionize how we gathered resources. And then she made an offer that changed everything, Kethral continued. She said humans would be happy to share their mining technology with the Alliance in exchange for peace. Not surrender, not tribute, not acknowledgement of defeat. Just an end to fighting so both sides could focus on more useful activities. Zixara made notes rapidly. How did your commander respond? Captain Vexorth was so surprised that he actually forwarded the offer to Alliance High Command, the veteran replied. Within hours, human representatives were contacting military leaders throughout our fleet, not to negotiate surrender terms, but to discuss mutually beneficial technology exchanges. Kethral's voice filled with amazement. Ambassador Su Jin led the human diplomatic team. She spoke 12 Alliance languages fluently and seemed to know more about our cultures than many of our own scholars. She did not negotiate like someone whose species was losing a war. She negotiated like someone who was offering to help solve problems. The peace talks lasted 3 weeks, the veteran continued. But they were unlike any diplomatic process in Alliance history. Ambassador Su Jin did not just discuss ending the war. She restructured the entire galactic political system. The old alien paused to drink from his glowing tube. His hands were steadier now, as if talking about peace calmed him more than discussing combat. Humans proposed something they called mutually beneficial cooperation. Instead of the old system where strong species conquered weak ones, they suggested that different species could work together and all become stronger. Ambassador Su Jin demonstrated this by solving several long-standing disputes between Alliance species, Kethral explained. Border conflicts that had lasted centuries were resolved in days using human diplomatic techniques. Resource shortages that had caused 3 wars were eliminated through human efficiency improvements. Zixara looked puzzled. Why were humans so good at diplomacy? Because they approach diplomacy the same way they approach warfare, the veteran replied. They study every participant, understand their motivations and fears, and find creative solutions that benefit everyone. The same skills that made them terrifying enemies made them incredibly effective allies. Kethral's voice became softer. The formal peace treaty was signed by representatives from all 12 Alliance species and humanity. But by then, most of our soldiers were already working with human technical teams to improve equipment and share knowledge. The psychological impact of peace was as dramatic as the impact of war had been, the veteran continued. Alliance species that had been terrified of humans during combat became fascinated by human culture and technology during cooperation. The old aliens' metal arms moved more smoothly now, less stiff than they had been during the combat stories. Humans established what they called cultural exchange programs with every Alliance species. They sent teachers to our worlds and invited our students to human universities. They treated former enemies like new friends. What happened to the soldiers who fought in the war? Zixara asked. Many needed medical help, Kethral admitted. Humans introduced us to concepts of psychological trauma that our species had never understood. They built treatment centers throughout Alliance space, specifically for veterans who had been damaged by the war. The veteran's voice became filled with gratitude. Lieutenant Yunji was a human medical officer who specialized in treating alien, psychological conditions. She worked with me for 2 years, helping me understand why I could not stop thinking about the battles. She taught me techniques for managing fear and anger that human soldiers had developed over thousands of years. The humans gave medical aid even to soldiers who had tried to kill them, Kethral continued with wonder in his voice. They said that healing former enemies was more important than holding grudges about past conflicts. This attitude was completely alien to most Alliance species. Zixara made final notes. How has the galaxy changed since the war ended? Humans now serve as peacekeepers for the Galactic Alliance, the veteran replied. When conflicts arise between species, human diplomatic teams are called in to find solutions. Their reputation for creative problem-solving and fair treatment has made them the most trusted mediators in known space. Kethral's voice became thoughtful. Military academies throughout the Alliance now teach human warfare theory as a required course, not to copy human tactics, but to understand how different approaches to conflict can be successful. Human methods of adaptation and creative thinking are studied by every species. But the most important change is psychological, the veteran continued. Before the war, Alliance species believed that conquest was the only way for civilizations to grow and prosper. Humans proved that cooperation and mutual benefit could achieve better results with less suffering. The old alien reached into a compartment in his chair and pulled out a small device. Lieutenant Yunji gave me this during my treatment, he said, holding up a simple human music player. She said music helps humans process difficult emotions and memories. Kethral activated the device, and soft human music filled the room. I still do not understand how the same species that created such beautiful art could be so terrifying in warfare. This contradiction is what I think about most during my rehabilitation. The music helps, he continued quietly. It reminds me that humans are not just warriors. They are also artists, teachers, healers, and friends. The war showed us their capacity for destruction. The peace has shown us their capacity for creation. Zixara turned off her recording equipment as the music played. Is there anything else you want people to know about humans? Kethral looked directly at the camera one final time. Humans are the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever known, he said clearly. But they are also the most hopeful. They fight with incredible violence when threatened, but they build with incredible generosity when trusted. The war taught us to fear human military power, the veteran concluded. The peace has taught us to appreciate human friendship. Both lessons were equally important for the future of our galaxy. The old alien sat back in his chair as the human music continued to play. For the first time during the long interview, Kethral looked peaceful. The memories were still painful, but sharing them had helped ease the burden he had carried for 50 years.